We're going to take a look now at the same property we've been studying, and we're going to look for more evidence, visual evidence, to help a seller or a buyer understand what's going on in that local economy near the subject property. Now, we've done a Bryan search on the property, which looked like this. It's a CMA report that shows people that purchased their property around the same date as the subject did, in this case back in 2006. These properties also were in the same area as the subject, again, same radius, the same year, and for about the same amount as the subject property. And we can see there's a lot of people, when they resold their property, they ended up selling it for less than they paid for it, or barely what they paid for it. So now we want to show a seller or a buyer another visual, not just people who bought in the same quarter or the same year as the subject. We're actually going to take a look at properties that were purchased all the way back to 1998, because this particular MLS allows us to see that far back. The key to these properties is the following. They all paid around the same dollar amount, however, in the same radius. But the key to all of these is they've sold out here in about the 2012-2013 economy. So they might have purchased way back here in 98, 99. You can see 2000, 2001. The key to this is these properties have resold in today's economy. The subject property, of course, was purchased right on this yellow line in 2006. What we want to show the seller is a visual. What does it look like if you bought a home in any of these years, right? Looks like you're going to lose money if you resell in the present economy. Almost everybody did. We have a few properties that were above the line, but you have to go all the way back to 2004 before you start seeing people actually making money on the sale of their property. The key to these, again, with these properties were around the same purchase amount in the same radius. We aren't looking at style. Let's take a look a little bit further at another way to present this to people, and that is, look in this column. They bought them in 1998, 99, 2000, 2001, okay, for around the same price as the subject property. And of course, they're in the same area as the subject property. You tell by these zip codes, all these properties are within a pretty close geographical range from the subject. The key to this one is they were bought in different years, but for around the same dollar amount. So if you invested around $300,000 and you resold, you bought in 98 and you resold, you're going to get about 1.7% appreciation per year, or, as you know, an increase in price per square foot per year. This is another way to talk about price per square foot. However, it's more of a consistent rate of return and easier to predict future values by using this concept than it is price per square foot. We also see this one, if you bought in 99, you're getting about 2.3%. Now, what you'll notice is everybody's in the same range. We are not seeing anybody at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. It's a very consistent way to look at DNA. Properties depreciating, are they neutral or appreciating? And even when we start losing money, you can see we aren't seeing many people that are way outside the norm, and anybody making money being way outside the norm. This is a pretty good predictor or forecaster of future value, what's going to happen in an area. You can see these were the good years, and then it started getting really risky to own a home, if you will, and then resell it. We have an occasion property like this that lost 7% every year of ownership. Now imagine you bought a property in 2008 for $365,000 and you resold it about 4 years later in 2012 and you lost 7% per year. Well, I can assure you this type of rate of return was a short sale. Same with this one, a short sale. Same with this one. These are properties that I've researched. These are so far out of the norm, they were short sales. Your typical homeowner was losing in this range per year, somewhere between 0.5 point and 2 points per year. Very consistent to look at people, what the typical retail seller lost, and then other people, of course, who sold their house wholesale, losing 3, 4, 5, 6% per year of home ownership in a very short period of time. And then finally, as we get down toward the 45th, 43rd, 44th record, you see that some people are starting to actually buy in 2010 and resell and make profit on it. And this trend is continuing because we started out everybody going green on their rates of return, and slowly we start becoming red, more red. Now we get very few green. All right, I've seen years of this where it was solid red, where homeowners who bought in a quadrant, if you were to buy in a particular time frame for a particular price and you resold in that economy, what you saw was just solid red with barely anybody making money. So when you're a buyer's agent or a listing agent, you're trying to help somebody get perspective on what should the list price be. What's overpriced, what's underpriced, especially what's overpriced. If the seller is trying to ask, back to this illustration here on the Bryan comps, when a seller, a current listing, if you will, is trying to ask more than they paid for the property, but bought it during the peak of the market, as you see in this illustration here. The peak of the market was around there, and they're trying to get a half a point per year. You're going to see that, let's go open this up here, they dropped $5,000. They've been on the market for 117 days. Apparently, asking 0.5% is still too high. Well, how do we know this? Well, we've already done a search on this, and this area is losing about 1.5 points per year if you bought it during this time. And before we looked at the expired listings, or the failed, and you can see that most of these properties were in the red, asking less than they paid for it, and they still didn't sell because they weren't asking enough negative rate of return. They should have been asking about 1.5% negative rate of return, because that's what the sold properties accomplished. And those, you can see a few of these in here, they were barely trying to make money, and they still didn't sell the properties. Essentially, the failed properties were statistically trying to outperform the marketplace. They were asking, if you will, too high of a price per square foot. And a great way to illustrate this to a seller, again, is when we're looking at this report here and showing these are the solds on this chart where people are barely making money, or loss, or loss, or loss, great loss, call it a loss, almost no loss, just all these people who are losing money. When you have a seller that wants to go green in a red market, a lot of it's going to depend upon when they bought it for about the value, and are they reselling in this economy? Because obviously when you purchased in some of these bad years, you're going to resell it, you're going to pay the price of a loss no matter what you read in the paper, because we are years away from recovering back to what people initially paid. We're going to show that to you in another graph in just a moment here. However, when you're trying to help a buyer or a seller get perspective, I want you to walk them through these graphs and this data, be able to show these incredible visuals to say that the market just says we can't do it if we bought in a certain time, meaning we can't actually ask more than we paid for it unless you pumped your house full of money or you stole it when you acquired it. And that is not usually the case. All right, just kind of, as we wrap this up, I want to make sure you're asking questions of the home seller when you're sitting in front of them. You're looking at this data, and you look at their section regarding the time frame that they purchased the property. Now, sometimes we have a lot more data in the subject's property year, but suffice to say, this is still pretty good data that in the year before they purchased their property till about the year or so after, almost everything has been negative. And those that did go positive, barely were positive. This is evidence for sellers to really help them get perspective. And you can ask a seller, in this economy, when you're reselling, and these other properties are reselling right during your economy for the same time frame, and they were bought around the same time frame for about the same amount, is the market going to help it let us go green or go red? Now, I have no opinion, sellers. I have no opinion on this. I'm just curious what you think when you see this report. You've got a hard copy of this. You're showing it to the sellers. This is a reality check. We've got to ask them, what do they think of it when they see that data as well as this data? Now, you might say, I'm not a data person. These are just stories. All we have to do is tell a story about this graph, understand what I've taught in this video, understand what is going on here. Essentially, green is good, red is bad, and ask the seller what they think of that information. It's like pricing therapy with home sellers. Okay, let's continue.